welcome to a new episode of the Gamer Talk podcast. Ben Kiefaber is my guest today. Hey, Ben, happy to have
Hello.
you.
How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing fantastic, wrapping up my day and now looking forward to record a podcast session with you. So Ben is a concept artist. I'm pretty happy to have him on the podcast. I didn't have that many concept artists in here, but I feel they are super important and the industry really needs them. So Ben, give us a short introduction. How did you get into concept art? Have you been drawing your whole life? How did that come together?
Yeah, so a quick introduction. I have been drawing most of my life, but it's not something I was particularly ever really that good at. I kind
Uh-huh.
of always lean more towards building things. Like my parents would get pissed at me because I would take everything apart in the house and get in kind of big trouble. Eventually it turned to fixing things, but they were not happy. But they, as presents, like for birthday and Christmas, they used to give me like old pieces of tech they didn't want anymore. So like they give me like a printer, and I just take that apart. Like
Ah,
so,
cool.
I spent most of my life doing that. I drew sometimes on the side, mostly on my homework when I was bored. I would draw like all the guns from Destiny, and I get in really big trouble because they did not like me drawing guns on my homework.
Oh yeah, I see.
It's in America. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
developed this fascination with fictional weapon design like when I was like 10, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
that was mainly the only thing I drew was that. I couldn't draw people very well, and I took some art classes, and I got also in very big trouble there because I was drawing guns instead of like the fruits we were supposed to draw. So the teacher would put out like a bunch of fruits, and she'd be like, draw these. I'd be like, okay, yeah, and then start drawing them, and you know, 10 minutes later, end up with some kind of gun design. She's like, oh, I can't believe you did that. It's like you're not supposed to do this in my class. It's like okay, yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
guns always have a special point.
yeah. I've always been fascinated by the mechanics of them,
Yeah,
not necessarily what they're used for, but more so just like how they work. Thing goes boom.
yeah.
I like it.
Same when I tell people here, especially like older people, what I do for a living, and as soon as you mention guns, they open their eyes and go like, "What are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you like you're close to a terrorist when you draw or do guns for
Don't
weapons?" It's yeah.
don't even get me started on that. Yeah, that's the way it's been in
Mm,
Connecticut. So I live in Connecticut. It's very people here do not like guns at all.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Understandably, there's been some things that's happened, but it's I used to scare the shit out of my parents growing up because drawing all that stuff they'd be like, oh my god, like it's scary, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can
it
imagine. Yeah.
yeah, no, it was funny. Anyways, yeah, I kind of stuck with it though. I were was I had a lot of fun with it. It's something it's always interested me, and I've went through different phases of like things I've liked to draw. I've drawn like characters, environments, everything. Like initially when I discovered concept art, it was during quarantine, so I was 16. I'm 20 right now, but 16, I was doing my homework from home, and I stumbled across concept art on Google because I was so bored out of my mind with like some kind of quadratic equation or some crap. I don't know. So
Mm-hmm,
I was done with
mm-hmm.
that, and I just stumbled across concept art. I'm like, this is really awesome. Like I just saw this fictional gun design. I'm like, I had no idea people actually do this. Like it's this thing I've been doing my entire life. I had no idea it's actually a job, which is like incredibly fascinating.
Yeah.
So I ended up buying this drawing tablet, and it was like one of those cheap Huion ones, and hooked it up to my computer. And the first thing I drew was gun design. But
Sweet.
yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I then later on wanted to do an indie game, got into character design,
Uh-huh.
realized that really wasn't my thing, and went back to hard surface. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's I've tried pretty much every subject matter, and just the weapon design is what stuck with me.
Nice. So you started out with basically just 2D drawings, right?
Yeah, more or less. I discovered Blender in eighth grade. Like the way what I do stuff before I even was 3D modeling. When I'd like design some kind of invention thing, like back in seventh grade, I participated like in an invention convention fair thing, and ended up like
Mm-hmm.
getting a couple awards for it. But that's kind of besides the point. The point more so is that I would like draw draw my invention things first before I'd actually like construct them, and that's what I used to mainly use my drawing abilities for was like the engineering side of things. And uh, yeah, like, and then eventually I discovered 3D modeling. I'm like, wow, this is incredible. I can actually build something without having
Mm-hmm.
to sacrifice materials, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's one, and this is a little bit of a side tangent, but one summer I had built this air pressure cannon for fun, and I actually shot a hole in the wall. Anyways, point being is, there was like that's just to give you an idea of like the kind of stuff I would do. I would get in trouble. But yeah, like I'd have a lot of fun building stuff, and then I realized like there's no material expenditure when I'm actually doing 3D modeling. So I'm like, okay, well I can basically make anything I want without having to pay for materials, which is like perfect.
Nice. Yeah. So what is your like inspiration when it comes to creating art or creating guns, for example? When taking a look at your portfolio, I see the Lazarus program,
Mhm.
which looks really cool, and I see it's like a bit influenced by Wolfenstein. Maybe it has some aesthetics, yeah, from the Wolfenstein games. And like, what are your inspirations? Where do you draw your inspiration from when it comes to concepting?
Yeah, so I like a lot of old retro futuristic stuff, like Destiny was that's not necessarily retro futurism, but it had a lot of Soviet
Mm.
influence in it growing up. That was a game I played when I think I was like 10 to like 13. I played a lot of it, and that influenced my design a lot. And that's something I look at to this day is like, a lot of those designs. And like a lot of my influences like is it's a lot of retro stuff. Like I love like the old Soviet propaganda posters, which is kind of a weird source of inspiration, but it has some very cool graphic elements on it. Or any kind of propaganda poster usually has some very strong bold graphic elements that I tend to incorporate into my graphic design elements. Also a lot of car designs, like I've
Hmm.
loved cars, like especially the old bulbous forms, and like the old like VW Beetle, like all that kind of stuff. I always find those very fascinating. um, there was like a short period of time where I was very interested in cars as a kid, where I like could like name pretty much any car. Like I think I had like 200 Hot Wheels cars, and like I just know the names of all of them. Which
Nice.
yeah, that was cars, and then eventually I discovered guns, and yeah, and guns have always been a very big inspiration because I have basically I was never grew up around them, but I always watched videos on
Hmm.
YouTube, like watched how they worked. I used to have this game where you could like take them apart, and like a big and like big sources of inspiration. It's definitely like cars and guns. That's more or less kind of it. Like what I would really look into. I guess one thing that really helped was so I met my friend Jean Luc. He worked on Deathloop and helped me a lot with that project, because Deathloop was a very big inspiration for the Lazarus program and
Yeah, yeah,
similar
true.
things.
Like the colors and how the whole presentation works.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
he's a genius. Thanks, thanks, Jean Luc.
materials.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you work on Deathloop, or was it just like inspiration?
I didn't. I just he was the guy who
I
directed
see.
it, so he gave me a lot of help and like pointers on like how to replicate the style and like how to think about stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. So, what do you enjoy most? Like, do you enjoy more working on like futuristic stuff or historical stuff, or like creating a cool mix between both of these aesthetics?
Mm,
How?
I tend to like like a mix of both because I enjoy whatever creates the most design problems to solve. Because the way I view design is like this 100 like thousand piece puzzle you have to like
Mm-hmm.
slowly put together, and there's really no way to do it specifically. So you can put the pieces in any order, but at the end of the day, it still resembles a picture. So like yeah, I really enjoy like the retrofuturism because it gives me a lot to pull from. It gives me like I can take from old things like like old guns, like let's say like in the 90s they had a lot of really weird prototype weapons that I'd like to reference. There's this one I'm working on right now which has like a bolt that's like angled weirdly to help mitigate recoil, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a gun from the 90s called the Jodimatic, made by I believe Finland, and they made a lot of weird stuff. So I like to
Mm-hmm.
reference these old things but then like put a futuristic finish on them.
Nice. So you always try to find a good mixture between both of the like historical stuff and to, yeah, to
Yeah,
to
100%.
to integrate them into each other. Nice. So yeah, like I have this often at my job where I get lots of concept art that need to be created in 3D, and sometimes when you take a look at 2D concept art, there is stuff that doesn't work in 3D, right? It looks cool in 2D, like the mechanics and all of it looks good, but then it doesn't make any sense in 3D. So how do you make sure as a concept art that your work or the stuff, the ideas you have, they work in 3D and make sense?
Yeah, so me and my friends call this thing the impossible form, which is what a lot of 2D artists who do pure 2D will do is they will paint something that's impossible to replicate in 3D.
Uh-huh.
And that's an
Mm-hmm.
issue that we run to a lot. And I did 3D art for a little bit, so like I can understand like what they look for and what they need. So I think by doing that, I've learned like how to solve problems for the modelers before they even like encounter them. And what I tend to do is I'll start out with a 2D sketch from a side view or a three quarters view, and then I will make like a rough blender block out and then like draw or paint over it, to like figure out form because I want to keep things in 3D space and keep things like, possible to model instead of an impossible form.
Yeah, I also like taking a look at your portfolio. You are one of the new gen concept artists where you heavily rely on 3D, and you try to concept in 3D. That's not like the traditional concept artist like 10 or 15 years ago. And that's really helpful for like people that, or for hard surface artists that then will create these weapons.
Yeah, I try to like solve problems with them. I'll just hand them my model directly and then they can either clean it up or, like use it for scale reference.
Hmm. Yeah, that's so big, and that's so helpful. I can tell you that.
Thank you. I'm glad I'm helping out then because
Yeah.
I can understand how much of a pain it is to get a concept that, doesn't make sense.
So all your weapons that you create are not like, they don't exist in real life. So how do you balance out the realism and like the stylization of your weapons? Like how far are you going with like crazy stuff, and how far are you, or how less, or how real you want to keep it? So how do you find the right balance between these two, like yeah, points, realism and fiction?
Yeah, so a lot of the time, I choose a not really a base weapon, but like a like a functional gimmick, right? Like I'll
Uh-huh.
be like,
So
okay, like here's like the angled bolt, right, from the Juddy Matic. I'll be like, okay, that's my functional gimmick, not to design around that single function, and
so
I have to
that's
make sure.
working, and that's existing in real life, right?
Exactly. So there are times like my friend Alex makes a lot of energy weapons, and he's told me he's like Ben, like if you do energy weapons, like you can pretty much do anything. Which honestly, I struggle more when I don't have constraints versus constraints because at least when I have like a functional gimmick, I can go off of something and keep myself grounded.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it really depends. Like like you said, the functional versus the fantastical element. It depends from design to design, right? Like if you look at the spaceship in my portfolio, that one's very fantastical.
True. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's still a weapon technically, but yeah, it's like it's very fantastical. But if you look at something like the Arawana, the belt fed like assault rifle, it's pretty grounded. Albeit a little fantastical. The caliber is way too high probably for it to actually work, but it's still an idea that potentially could work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just by pulling from those historical elements, I tend to ground my designs a little bit more.
Yeah, that's a good like that's a good starting point to take stuff that is like existing and then build around that, so you always have a like at the core, the weapon or the thing you're designing is functioning, right?
Yeah, 100%. Because yeah, like I used to have this thing I called transforming gun syndrome, which is where I'd start with one idea and then end up with a completely different one. So I think
Mm. Hmm.
like grounding yourself beyond that one gimmick, you can kind of stick with everything.
Yeah. So maybe you can run us through your workflow. I'm super interested how you like how your steps are when you create a gun.
Yeah, of course. So usually what I do is I start out with a 2D sketch. Like I'll do a lot of line work because I started out with drawing,
Uh-huh.
but then I'll
Like
sometimes
thumbnailing or something.
yeah, like I actually what's interesting is I don't necessarily do a lot of thumbnailing. I will do one sketch
Mm-hmm.
that's like decently high quality, then I'll replicate it and change a bunch of stuff. Like copy paste and change it. Like I'll usually keep one anchor point. Like let's say I'll keep the grip, right? Then I can just completely redesign the rest of the gun.
Huh. Mm-hmm.
Because I have this thing like I don't like the like like the blank canvas syndrome where you sit there and you have like a blank canvas and you're like, oh god, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
just by copy pasting that one element, I can kind of already give myself like a jump start and doing the other rest of the design. But yeah, after that, after I have my 2B sketch, I'll usually do a block out in Blender, and because Blender lets me block out very quickly and like figure out forms in like 3D space, and I'll usually do it from a
Yeah.
first person view because in FPS games, the gun is basically the hero because you don't see your character, so you have to like make sure it looks good from like the player's point of view. And I'll make sure it also has an animation gimmick. Like I usually do a quick animation to figure out like how it looks when it's firing, because like usually you have to have
That's
some
good.
kind of like like interest point. Like on the example on the shotgun that I did is like like the barrel reciprocates back and forth when it fires. A bunch of other
Yeah.
like bunch of weird stuff going on, but also then I'll tend to like take it into plasticity. After I have my block out, I'll usually export it as like a step file and then import the plasticity just for scale reference and just remodel the whole thing. And the whole
Hmm.
process can usually take like 3 days from start to finish. It's pretty quick because
That's
plasticity.
crazy.
Yeah, no, it's decently fast. Like with Blender, it used to take me a lot longer, but the second I picked up plasticity, it's like way faster for guns because you can change stuff much quicker. You can like mess around, like manipulate form much easier. I mean, I worked with booleans a lot in Blender, but I figured out plasticity is it's a lot faster for guns specifically.
Nice. So basically, you are not really designing in 2D. So you're basically designing in 3D, right? So all your details, all the bolts, all the buttons, you all do that in 3D before it even gets in 2D.
Yeah, it depends. Like
Huh.
sometimes, like to figure out more complex details or form integration, I will do a lot of painting in 2D over my model. But it depends. Like usually, I can stay in 3D pretty long. Like that one combine gun I did in my portfolio, the Half Life one, that was done completely in 3D. I didn't do any sketching. Um,
Hmm.
but like,
So
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
That's all good. I was just saying, like like the basically a lot of 3D sketching. I just do the sketching in Blender. That's more or less it.
So do you then overpaint, or how you handle that, or
Designs
do you
the
texture?
Yeah, so to design like or fix specific design elements, I will overpaint, and then for my final textures, I use like some Blender add-ons like Fluent Materializer to add quick
Hmm.
materials and then just do a quick render. I usually have like a pre-made lighting setup I just use for everything because it's usually just like two sun lamps, like one is a fill and one is like a rim light,
Yeah.
and it
The
works pretty
less, the
good.
better. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I found the sun lamps work really well, and then maybe I add like one or two area lights to like accentuate certain points, but otherwise it's pretty simple.
So you do all the colors and textures in Blender
Yeah,
and
everything's
basically
procedural.
overpaint. Okay.
Usually I don't overpaint though for the final. Overpainting is like for me at least, it's for like just solving design issues because I want to
Nice.
like figure stuff out because my I figured out 3D helps me execute things to a higher degree versus 2D. Like I could execute it to the same degree with 2D. It's just going to take a lot longer, especially for hard surface design.
Hmm. I see. So yeah, first of all, congrats to your new job.
Oh, thank you.
System Red, like that, they are doing fantastic stuff.
Yeah, we just released a trim sheet pack recently. It's
Oh yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
yeah, it's
really, really cool.
thank you. It's to help with like game development, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's been fun.
So you basically focused on weapons then when it comes to concepting, or are you doing bigger stuff like vehicles or other stuff?
So I freelance outside of SystemRed as well. So right now I'm working on a project doing weapons and vehicles, but
Hmm.
it depends. Like I mostly focus on weapons. I had a conversation with my friend Kane, and he's like, I had this is about like I think almost a year ago. He was like, I was struggling to find work at the time. It wasn't a great time in the industry, but I was working on my portfolio, and I was like, Kane, like how can I improve my stuff? And he's like, well, focus on guns because you're actually good at guns. I'm like, okay, that's a good point. And I sat down and did a lot of guns, and then then I found work. So I think like finding the one thing you're actually really interested in. Like I never get tired of doing guns. So it's like
Hmm.
versus vehicles. I
Hmm.
got kind of tired of doing them at some point.
Nice. So what did you like learn at your what was like the biggest takeaway from being a concept artist now for a few years? What would you say to your younger self if you had the chance? Like, you don't need to focus on Photoshop, just to learn Blender or learn plasticity. What is the biggest takeaway that you would make differently maybe?
I would say personally just focus learning fundamentals, like focus on design a lot. Like design
Mhm.
is like I think the most important thing to getting a job is design. My whole goal this entire time, I think I've done it for like 4 years now, is just get a job. And
Yeah.
I would tell myself also, like, don't stress too hard. I was very stressed all the time about it. Like I was like, oh god, I need to get a job, I need to get a job, because I knew I wasn't going to go to college. So in high school, I would kind of just like grind during school. Like I'd sit down. My teachers would were not always very happy because I convinced the school that I couldn't read on paper, so I brought in my laptop. And
No way. No
yeah,
way. That
yeah,
worked.
it worked. It was like my little scheme. I was like, I can't read on paper, and then I brought in my laptop and just did client work during school. So um, my math teacher always told me to stop rendering. It was funny.
Oh my god. That's a hustle mentality. Like start early and bring your work to school. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
no, I was done with school, but it was all my teachers knew. They're like, he's not going to go to college. Like, there's no point in trying to
Mm.
push. So I
Which is fine, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was good because it took a lot of convincing. Like initially with my parents, I had to convince them, but it was
Yeah.
eventually they
Yeah.
realized they're like, okay, you can actually make money. Like you
Yeah.
can, if you're doing well, like it's actually a pretty viable career. So I mean, yeah, it's like eventually I proved it. Only took like I think a couple months to prove it, but it was like okay. And they're like then I realized like okay, he's serious about this, so let's back off a little bit.
Nice. Yeah, I think when it comes to our jobs, it's super hard to convince your parents that this is like a whole industry and there are jobs there that need to be filled and that you can actually earn money. So yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, honestly, the thing I always tell my friends, like, I've had friends who are also trying to get in, and I tell them, I'm like, listen, if your parents don't believe them, just talk to me or talk to one of my friends. Like, I'll get them to, I will get them to believe because,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like, a lot of my friend Alex, he's like, it was about a year ago. I was talking to him, and he's like, I told him, like, my parents are, trying to make me go to college. They don't want to incur the debt, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, just get him to talk to me. I can convince him.
Nice.
Yeah, no, it's funny, but
So when
I
you
can
speak
definitely agree. Sorry, go ahead.
so when you speak about Alex, are you speaking about the Alex?
Yeah, Seneschal.
Yeah. His work is really
Yeah, he's been a
yeah.
very big help to me over the years.
Okay. So he's the CEO of SystemRed or
Yeah,
he's the owner?
yeah,
Oh, nice. Yeah, so yeah, I can imagine you learned a lot from him. Like I've been a big fan of his work for quite a long time and yeah, he has been one of the many reasons why I got into games and like hard surface.
that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, he's been a very big influence to me as well. He's helped me out a lot with design. Design, I'd say the most is what he's helped me with because he has a lot of like design knowledge, a lot of like principles he follows. And I don't necessarily follow the same principles, but I can use it as a good starting point to be like, okay, like like focus on proportion, focus on integration of form, like form's important, like all this kind of
Mhm.
stuff. And
Mhm.
because like people say there's no rules of concept art, but I can agree to a certain point where I think there's like some things you can do to make your design better, but at the same time, you can break rules, to make it even better sometimes.
I see. Yeah. Yeah. So how is your approach? Like this is a bit referring back to the last question, but how is your approach to concept art changed? You mentioned Alex, you learned a lot of stuff from him, but how do you see your work now? Maybe a bit different compared to the years before when you have been at school, maybe.
So I started out doing a lot of drawing. Like I followed Fang Zhu's design cinema a lot. He was a very very big inspiration to me. I like a lot of I want to do a lot of 2D drawing, and so I was like obsessed with making my line work good, which honestly made my design suffer because if you focus on your 2D like execution, then your design starts to suffer a little bit. But anyways, like I was very big into that. I used to like listen to that during school. I'd like listen to that when I go for a walk. I listen to it like in bed. I basically listen to design cinema like constantly, just to like
Hmm.
get it into my head. And a lot of the stuff he says is true. I agree with most of it. And yeah, like it's very helpful for especially I would recommend it to beginner concept artists for learning like the fundamentals of drawing more or less.
Sweet. So let's say you speak with younger aspiring concept artists. What's one of the biggest advices you would give them when it comes to how to get into your job and how to learn the skills?
I'd say seek out friends. like don't try to make connections, make friends, because I know some people who like try to seek out like I need to connect with person, I need to like keep professional, but I feel like honestly making friends early on is good because you all will develop as artists and eventually you'll help each other out.
Hmm.
And because I think about it like this, right? There's waves of concept artists that come in, like generations. So I had made
Yeah,
friends before we all got in the industry, and then we eventually all got in, and then we like still help each other out. So it's like, I think just making friends is the most important thing because you can help, you can get critique, you can get advice, like you have moral support because it can be ultimately a difficult job to like grind for, because there's no right and wrong.
true.
So like
Yeah,
you sit there like wondering like what am I doing wrong, like why am I not having a job, all that kind of stuff. And your friends can be there to offer advice or moral support.
yeah. So AI has been coming up in the last few years, and it's getting a bit of annoying and
Yeah.
reading and listening about it. But I just want to hear your take on it. Like, how has it influenced you, or do you see your job in danger? Which is something I wouldn't say, but um, like, is there any influence you get from it, or maybe even benefits, which would be cool? But how do you see that? Yeah.
So I generally my rule is I tend to not want to touch AI because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
it will a make my designs more generic and b
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a big fan of the way it's trained off like other content without permission. So and to answer your question about like my job being in danger, I really do not see my job being in danger at all, at least for weapon design, because there's so
Yeah.
much you have to consider
Definitely.
functionally, so much you have to consider like technically, design wise, visually. Like I don't think within the next 10 years there'll be an AI that can replicate that because the amount of thinking you have to do, the amount of knowledge, unless the model is trained very specifically, I don't see it as a threat at all. I see it more as like it's a mosquito that keeps biting you.
Yeah. Same. Yeah. I I don't see any danger coming up for us at the
Yeah,
moment. Yeah.
exactly. And I want to tell that honestly, like if any beginner concept artists are listening, I'd say just don't stress about AI. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. So how do you approach your concepts when you say you get on a project and it has a specific art direction? How do you make sure your designs match with the art direction? What are your guidelines when taking a look at art and maybe different art styles?
Yeah, so I'll tend to break things down when I get a designer. Right, let's say example, they want me to design a gun that has some kind of like retrofuturistic design language. Right, let's say it's based off a CD player. So
Oh
I'll
yeah.
look at
Hmm.
my brief and be like, okay, well, what makes a CD player a CD player? Well, it's round because they have to put a CD in it. It has a screen. Usually, it has like some kind of LCD screen because it's old. Has these buttons on it. A lot of stuff that I think about, usually bulbous forms as well, because back in the time they had this fruitier arrow type style where a lot of the
Hmm.
products were like kind of
I
these
love it.
rounded things. I love it too. It's one of my favorite aesthetics.
Hmm.
But yeah, I'll then tend to think about okay, now I have all these elements as guidelines I can use, so I can implement into my design. So I'm like, okay, it has to be round, has to have buttons, has to have a screen somewhere, and it has to have that CD thing. So I'll be like,
Hmm.
okay, well, maybe the CD is like the ammo. Maybe it has like a screen that shows like how much ammo is left. It
Mm.
has buttons to manipulate the opening of the CD case part. Stuff like that. So by taking ideas from real life things and the way they exist fundamentally, I feel like you can come up with very interesting designs.
Okay, so you try to take a look at modern or at everyday items and try to get something out of it.
Yeah, and then sorry, I forgot to answer the part about following design specifications. But I
Yeah.
tend to ask questions. I'll be okay, like like what specifically do you need for this part? Like, and just make sure that I know exactly what they want. And I'll be okay. Well, now that I have my answer, I'll design it and I'll take those elements. Let's say, as I said, the CD player. Like they say, okay, this has to look like a CD player. I'll take those elements that visually make up a CD player, then like reskin it and apply it to like a weapon that I design. Like it's kind of like a base.
Hmm.
Usually that's the way I
Nice.
work.
Sweet. Yeah. How would you say that the concept art will evolve or will develop in the next few years? Are there any other tools or any other workflows that will be coming along?
I think plasticity and Blender will be the king for 3D personally, because
Mm-hmm.
now with the Blender bridge and plasticity, you can make a lot of cool stuff very quickly. I tend to have a hybrid approach to Blender and plasticity where I'll model some parts in Blender and some parts in plasticity.
Uh-huh.
And it's just by using that approach, you can do things much faster versus just using one program or one package. Um, I think that like weapon art and hard surface, I can only speak to these two because this is what I have experience with. Will probably move more towards 3D. My current job, I'm doing a lot of 2D though, but I think for the most part, yeah, especially like with the needing to look good in first person, we'll be doing a lot of 3D. I think maybe for
Yeah.
stuff like environments, 2D will still be definitely heavily involved in the process, but I think ultimately the final product will be done in 3D.
Yeah, which is always like a good baseline or a good starting point for then for the hard surface artist or for the weapon artist. So because then you are on the safe side, because then the weapon makes sense from a first person perspective, but it also makes sense when it comes to like a design perspective. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. Especially because 3D can help you focus on the integration of the parts in like three-dimensional space, right? So like the one thing I always like to think about when I'm designing a gun is like how all these parts fit together and how it can be taken apart, right? Because I have to think about it like
Mm-hmm.
a soldier has to take this apart. It has to be pretty simple and pretty comprehensible. Um, because if you think like throughout history, right, like a lot of guns are always pretty simple, at least the ones that are adopted, because they have to be easy to maintain and easy to replace parts for.
Yeah, that's true. So how far would you then go when it comes to realism for a gun? How 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 much sense does your gun need to make? Because there are many gun enthusiasts out
Mm-hmm.
there who are fighting wars on forums or on ArtStation and saying your concept or your weapon doesn't make any sense. It would like
Mm-hmm.
break it would break the player's hand and like destroy your face because the shells are flying out and like all this kind of stuff. So how far are you or how intimidated are you by these people
I
who
just
want
ignore
to
them completely, honestly, because
okay,
if let's say they had their way, right, most designs would all look the same. So I think by
true,
breaking the rules a little bit, you can create much more interesting design. Like I don't think
yeah,
anyone should ever have to make something 100% realistic because I mean, like, what's the point in doing something 100% realistic? Because there's already
mm-hmm.
guns out there that exist, right? So
Yeah,
I think like by making something new and novel, right? Like I get a lot of criticism on my gun designs, which I take it into account, but some of it is like oh, this just isn't realistic, which is like I'm completely aware, right? Because like I used to be one of those people who was like, this isn't realistic, you can't do that, this would
mm-hmm.
explode, blah blah
Mm-hmm.
blah,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
I think after a while maturing and realizing like not everything has to be realistic. You can bend the
True.
rules to make something cool. Like that's completely fine. And I honestly I just ignore these people because I feel like if I follow their advice, it just make my designs more boring.
Yeah, and on the other side, we need to be honest. Yeah, like we are creating games, and we have flying aliens and spaceships,
Yeah,
and we are not creating like a military sim most of the time. And if it were a military sim, they it would be they would be like real life weapons,
yeah.
right?
So it's like why do guns get the amount of scrutiny they get? Right. I think it's.
Yeah, like
I, Sorry, go ahead.
we don't have the same for characters, right? Or
Yeah, a
for
100%. Or aliens, like right, like you can look at Starfield, and like there's spaceships there that probably would make no sense aerodynamically, right? But you see,
yeah,
like, and the people are like, oh, here's what's wrong with the Starfield guns. Like, I have a serious
but they
bone
look
to pick with
cool.
those people. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Like,
Mm.
it's just, man, it's like I think it's because
Well,
you have these YouTubers who like break things down, and then you get a bunch of people with like very very rudimentary gun knowledge, and be like, oh, well, X person said this on YouTube, therefore it applies to every single thing, which is not always
yeah.
true, right? Like an example is there's always like I'll refer back to the Johnny Matic, right? The canted bolt gun, and
Mm-hmm.
people I get a lot of criticism for that. They're like, oh, height over bore, this wouldn't work, like a bunch of other stuff, like technical gun mumbo jumbo, and I'm like, look at this gun, this exists. Like there's this 100% exists in real life, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like there's absolutely no reason why this shouldn't work. I think people
Yeah.
like that just want a reason basically to be upset, more or less.
Yeah, maybe they are that harsh because yeah, you see the gun all the time and you want to see that mechanic work and make sense maybe, but yeah, that's
Yeah.
like the only reason I could tell that yeah, that
Yeah,
these
like
people are the way they are.
100%. Like my friend who like actually worked in manufacturing guns and now he does 3D art
Mm.
for Ryzen. He's like, it's
Oh,
really funny.
sweet.
Yeah, it's really funny because he's like, bro. I don't want to listen to this, man. These guys are so annoying. Like
Yeah.
he doesn't like it either, even though he's actually manufactured guns. He can understand like
He nobody knows it better, right? Than
nobody
than
knows it better
versus
than
him.
him. Like
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
knows for a fact. Like I can ask him. Like I'll show him an AK variant. He's like, oh yeah, it's the AK like 103. I'm like, how the hell do you know that? There's like one like visual, tiny, distinct difference in it, and
Hmm.
it's like
No.
he's a genius. Like this guy is crazy smart when it comes to guns, and like he appreciates like just crazy wacky designs because he knows like it's kind of it's I would honestly describe it as like the modern art of gun design because
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's just none of it doesn't all make sense, but it's kind of cool sometimes.
That's true. Yeah, and it's for in my case, guns don't always need to make sense because yeah, you limit yourself in a way, and you maybe you have a you limit yourself for like maybe not creating a gun that would be like super cool and super fun to play if it wouldn't make any if it but it doesn't make any sense, which is a pity, right? if you
Yeah,
if you stop creating weapons that don't look cool and don't are making fun just because they are not real
yeah.
or don't work, right?
I guarantee one of my gun designs will probably end up on one of those videos one day. But it's fine. But at the same
You
time,
jinxed it now. Yeah.
it's I guarantee it was going to happen eventually. So I guess we'll check back in a couple of years and see if it does. But I think like yeah, like a lot of these gun designs, I think it's interesting, and I think ultimately like a good example of like functional gimmicks that are really cool is the Deathloop game. Like there's
Oh yeah.
like some really awesome ideas in that game. Luckily, that one didn't get much scrutiny because it's like pretty stylized, so people don't like tend to scrutinize stylized guns as much.
That's a good take. Yeah, yeah, yeah. If they are stylized and if they are like in a have a future or a bit of a stylized art style, they they don't get critiqued, right?
Yeah, I think it's just like the crowd, the realistic gun attracts, right?
Ha. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
it's mostly like that.
Yeah, like Fortnite guns maybe don't make any sense, but they get the main audience for these games are kids and not gun enthusiasts and
Yeah,
yeah. Mm.
100%. Like it's like it's like Tarkov versus Fortnite, right? If you put one of my designs in
Yeah,
Tarkov, it would make
true.
absolutely zero sense. If you put it in Fortnite, it still wouldn't really make sense. It would make a little bit more sense. So
Mm.
it's
True.
kind of like that. It's like the setting.
So is there any franchise you really admire or you would like to work on in the future? Like you
So
say that's super outstanding.
I have like a couple. I'll break it down to
Okay.
three though. I would say Half Life has been a big inspiration for me.
Uh-huh.
Definitely Dead Space. I absolutely love Dead Space. It's like one of my favorite. I played I think the remake like 20 times in a row. That was like
Huh.
ridiculous. I did nothing but play the remake over and over and over again. But I think that has like the best atmosphere of any game I've ever played, as well as like just the concept of like necromorphs and like the technology they have is just so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then Metal Gear Solid for like its themes and like
Oh,
its
cool.
design. I absolutely love Metal Gear. Like I actually have a tattoo of Metal Gear on my left shoulder.
Oh, okay. You are a Metal Gear Solid fan then.
Yeah, I love it. It's been awesome. I've been playing Metal Gear Solid 2 on the PS2 recently. I brushed all the dust off of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought like last weekend I had a thought that I could get myself a PS2 again because yeah, the games industry has been pretty boring in the last
Mhm.
few years and there are not like these really bangers and the video games that just make fun and yeah, just for nostalgic reasons I just want to have fun again and not care about the highest
No,
graphics.
I agree with you 100%. Like I see like, like the PS2 I think was one of the best eras of gaming. And maybe I'm
Mm-hmm.
biased because that's what I grew up on. I grew up on a PS2 and CRT even though I was born in 2004. I think until I
Yeah.
was like 10, I had like a CRT. But like, like a lot of that stuff is like, the games are just awesome. And I really miss that like exploration that they used to do. And because there really wasn't anything to base stuff off of. They just like, create something new. And
Yeah, they tried out stuff.
yeah,
They took risks, which is in these days super hard to
it's
do
not, yeah, because when you have a
because
giant conglomerate, right, saying like, okay, we need X amount of profit off this product. Here's the strategy we
exactly.
can use. It could be like
Then you
most
play the
efficient.
safe game. Hmm.
Exactly. I think games is one of those things that's inherently risky, right? Like working in the
Mm-hmm.
games industry is 100% inherently risky, right? Because if you're doing freelance, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to have work tomorrow. So
Yeah, true.
I think games should stay risky and games should continue to explore because, like, what's the point if they're not? You're just going to get the same thing over and over and over again,
Hmm.
which,
But yeah, when you have these big mega corporations that are here for the maximum profit, and they want to squeeze everything out of
Yeah.
the player. You are not willing to take risks because then your investors are crying. And yeah,
Yeah, 100%. That's the thing that drives me crazy. Is I see these YouTube videos saying like, "Oh, these devs are so lazy," and like this is the one thing I have a big bone to pick with. It's like the devs aren't the one making those decisions. They're like,
yeah,
"Well, this is
they
indie.
are mostly
They're just following orders." Yeah,
not aligning with these decisions, right? They are, yeah, they need to do what they need to do because they are earning money and they have their jobs, you know.
yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I think honestly, we're going to see a return to form within the next 3 years of the games industry becoming more freedom based. Because I think ultimately, with all these layoffs, everyone started to form their own studios. Like Alex wasn't laid off. It's just SystemRed was formed because everyone got kind of tired of
Hmm.
freelancing. So
Hmm.
point being is like like by doing indie stuff and like projects, everyone's going to create these kinds of new like novel projects. Like let's say Metal Gear, right? I guarantee you within the next couple of years there'll be a new Metal Gear that comes out. Like not like Metal Gear itself, but like a game like it that's influential.
Yeah, and also like indies, like I think people realize that indies, especially with like the technology now, and games are like they get more easier to create over the years. I think the indies are more valued because people are realizing I'm so long playing video games, and I don't wanna. I've seen it all for now, right? I
Yeah,
saw the high end graphics on The Last of Us. I saw the big maps on Battlefield. I just want to have fun, and I want to play games after work and turn my brain off and have fun and chill out. And I don't need those high end productions. I just need games that are fun. And so people might be realizing, yeah, I don't. An indie game can be fun as well, right? Like how's the card game called?
yeah,
Balatro?
Balatro, yeah,
Balatro, yeah. Like it's super successful, and it's created by a few persons, and yeah,
yeah.
things like these make me still believe in the games industry, you know.
I still 100% believe in it. I just think like the future is with independent game development and independent funding because I think ultimately, like as I said, we're doing a return to form. Like I think we'll have another PS2 era pretty soon because everyone's sick of like the blockbuster crap that's coming out constantly. And
Yeah.
you know like I think people are now the game developers who are still in the industry are willing to take risks because we're like we're kind of tired of seeing the same thing because everyone who gets in the game development we love games, right? Like we wouldn't be it's a hard industry to get
Exactly.
into. I would say honestly it's probably as difficult to get into as like maybe professional sports, but like like if you like obviously believe you can make it. And the thing is like everyone I know who's like in the industry, like everyone just loves games, right? And we all like it's painful to see like the state that things are in right now.
Yeah, true. Yeah. We came in for the different reasons that the industry is consisting of. Like we came in because we are creative, we want to work on amazing stuff, and not we're not here like to maximize the profit for big companies, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just everyone wants to make a product that's impactful, and everyone wants to make something that's like it's a game. It's something that you can be immersed in, because ultimately I think a lot of people play games to like become immersed in the fictional world, and I think that's ultimately the strength of the PS2 catalog. Is a lot of these games had very strong world building and very strong
Mm-hmm.
ideas that you get immersed in very easily. Like examples like Silent Hill 2. That's like it's such like a emotional game and one that you can get immersed in
Yeah.
very easily with the
Yeah.
atmosphere.
Yeah, also like I think the whole update culture and first day patches
Oh
that
yeah,
also led to like making game development not that how do you say it? Um like it always gives the opportunity to fix your game at a later point, and you don't need to publish a game when it's like perfect and working out. So back then the games that came out all worked, and they all
yeah,
there was nothing buggy. And like back then games were easier. That's something else, and they didn't have this big content, but still they were fully fleshed out, and there was no way to fix it, right? It had to be good. It had to be good at this specific date, which also led to pressure on like the people working on it, but still it it was a perfect product. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think like I believe it was Miyamoto who said this, but he's like, a rush game is bad forever. A game that everyone takes their time on is good forever.
Hmm.
And I think ultimately that's a motto we should all live by. It's not financially like viable anymore. I think to like try to make the perfect game because everyone's realized we can push out a half baked product and finish it later, which I vehemently disagree with. You know, and
Yeah.
because I think we should be putting our best foot forward, putting our best product out, and being like, okay, everyone, here's the thing we made, and it creates an impact. And it's like, wow, this is actually a really good game. Like they spent their
Mm.
time, they did everything. I want more from this publisher or this company.
Yeah. Yeah, they I think like the game studios need to focus more on the players. Like they it doesn't feel like they create the stuff for the players. It feels more they create the stuff for themselves or for like the companies that are led by like the companies that are creating these games.
Yeah, it definitely depends. I think, yeah, like and honestly, and this is just kind of a side tangent. I think like the most successful games have the most simple premises.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like, yeah, like what's a good example? I'm trying to think. Like I don't know, like I think Darkwood is a really good game. I like that one a lot. It's like survival horror. All the premises is just like get out of the forest, survive the night. You know, Resident Evil. Just survive. Like survival horror, I think is my favorite genre because it incorporates like Legend of Zelda puzzle elements and a
Hmm.
bunch of other stuff in horror. It's very cool. And I think like stuff like that. Like the most simple premises are always the most successful games. Celeste, just climb the mountain.
Yeah. Some some game that really stuck with me was Hades.
Mm-hmm.
Um because on one point the game is like super you can always replay it. It has huge replayability value because you can always start new runs. It's a roguelike. So it still fills with so many content because you always experience new runs, new boons. It's fantastic, and it was created by a small team, and it's still, yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Hades is
possible
fantastic. I
to
agree.
create games. Yeah. So Ben, it was a fantastic podcast with you.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
taking your time. I think the listeners gained a lot of like insight into concept art and how this new generation of concept artists is working. And I will link all your portfolio. And do you have anything else like a website or something?
I just have our station, yeah, our station Twitter
Okay,
mostly. But I think like yeah, no, it's been wonderful. Thanks for having me.
I will link all your information in the show notes. And thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, of course. No, I was glad to be here. Awesome.
Amazing. Have a great rest of your day, Ben, and take care.
Yeah, you too, bro. Take care.
Bye bye.
See ya.